are. It's amazing. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Briar Harvey. This is the Neurodiversity Media Network. Today, we are here for the premiere episode of Movies and Munchies. So, a little bit about how this works. Mostly, this is Melissa's show. Sometimes I will be here. Sometimes friends will be here. And what we're doing is movie reviews, largely of things from our childhood, and often things with food, because, like Munchies. So we are talking about the film Steel Magnolias today. And we will cover several key important recipes from that film. I think Melissa has remade a few of them for you to be edible because, as we will discuss, some of these things are, dated now. Just a little bit. Some ground rules. As someone who has had a podcast for 5 years about films, we have all agreed we're only vaguely mentioning actors and any potential things about actors, because I do not want to spend the next hour talking about the bad behavior of people in Hollywood, which is always what happens if you talk about actors. They're all terrible. No one's great. Okay, there's a few exceptions, but mostly, this movie
the
has
only
Dolly
caveat.
Parton.
Yeah, the only caveat on this one is because it has Dolly Parton. Like, that's the only one.
Right.
But I'm sure if I looked into it, I would find some terrible information about Sally Field, and we're not going to look into it, is what we're saying. So that is the rule about the cast. I'm going to give you numbers and notes. Every episode we'll run through a brief summary, and then we will kind of walk through the movie and walk through the food and just do a whole thing. So, this movie premiered in 1989. It had a budget of $15 million. And its box office take was $96.8 million, which by any marker is a commercial success. It was, however, not a critical success, which I was really shocked by. The tomato meter score, Rotten Tomatoes, 66%, which,
it's rough.
It's rough. I was surprised by this. I neglected to look, will look now, how many awards this movie was nominated for, but it was significant, and I do kind of feel like Sally Field maybe won an Oscar for that whole bit there at the end. Maybe not. No, the only Academy Award was for Julia Roberts, and she was nominated. She did win the Golden Globe for this movie, and the film won the People's Choice Awards. So clearly, not a critical favorite, not a Hollywood or industry favorite, but we're still talking about that stupid fucking Cuppa recipe all these years later. So clearly, Steel Magnolias lives on.
It's something. It's just a very culturally significant movie, especially if you grew up in the South. It is so, it's just a picture. It's like a snapshot of the 80s, the early 90s, some places right now still, it's just very accurate. I mean, obviously it's fiction, but it's pretty accurate as the feeling of living in the South. in a small town.
It was kind of a requirement growing up in the South that you see this movie. You have seen it, and I've seen it so many times that now when I watch it, I can quote every line right along with the cast. I know everybody's lines. And I've never once made it through without crying.
Now, and that is like, there's a lot about this movie that'll set me off, but like, I never get through it without tears. My standard movie review schedule is that I watch it the night before on a big screen so I can like be reminded and take it in. And then the morning of, so like at 7:30 this morning at 1 1/4 speed on my little tiny screen. So I'm paying attention to it. And even then, still there were tears. So
there are always going to be tears. It's just so tragic. And I've actually met a couple of people this week who had never seen it. And I thought, that's outrageous that you haven't seen it, but they're also not from the South.
Yeah.
So I think it's very culturally explicit.
Yeah. That was a very weird moment for me because, so Beth and I know each other because we're military family members. And when I moved out of the South, like that was kind of a culture shock, like not a huge one, but a little, like just that's not like a universal thing of like, you have to watch Steel Magnolias and Fried Green Tomatoes. And that's just a requirement.
That movie is also on our list for reviewing, just so y'all are clear. And please do, as this show continues, because movie reviews is something we can do forever. If y'all have favorites that you would like for us to discuss and do recipes for, please do let us know. So this movie was originally a play by Robert Harling, which I have actually seen. There is truly very little difference between the stage play and this film.
Yeah.
And, it's based on the true story of Robert Harling's sister, who had type 1 diabetes and died after she had her son. But so I wonder if that's why there's very little difference, right? Because it was so true and so personal for him.
Yeah.
I think too, there's something about it that, despite the era of it, is still very timely. It doesn't matter that there was no technology. The reality is, this is still personally, potentially, the case for a woman with type 1 diabetes. Even here in the 2020s,
right?
The medical technology around diabetes in particular has not advanced that much. We have pumps now.
Hooray. That you can hook up to your smartphone.
Yeah.
So there is that, but there haven't been any significant cures. There haven't been any significant strides made in the medical field around type 1 diabetes. And I had a second cousin who died fairly young because of complications. So this story still hits home and will continue to, I think.
And so because it's set with a fairly wealthy family, like it doesn't really come up in that, but like every single person I have ever known who has type 1 or often, type 2 diabetes, but type 1, they've been living with it for their entire lives, right? Or they have a child who has type 1. And like the sheer amount of money and fight that you have to like go through to get insurance to pay for your insulin, this thing that you need to literally live. You can't live without it. But yeah, like the amount of work and money and debt that goes into that, and like the choices that people make just because, you know, you need insurance, and sometimes that means like working at things that you don't necessarily want to work at because they have insurance, and
Right.
it's like a whole conversation.
Right. In this case, we have Jackson, the Mississippi lawyer, and they're going to make money no matter what, right? And
Right.
actually, for people who are from the South, that's accurate. Like,
Yes.
lawyers are going to make good money down south,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what. For
Yep.
anyone without that income, especially today, type 1 diabetes is basically enforced poverty. The insulin is prohibitively expensive on its own. And this is something that we've talked about here on the network a lot. But to be able to get the Medicaid then or Medicare that you need, you are restricted to being able to make a certain amount of money. Otherwise, you have to pay for all of your own care. And type 1 diabetes is still a pre-existing condition that is not necessarily covered even under Cobra. So you are basically forced to be poor, or you are forced to make enough money to maintain your own personal care. There's no in between here.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I think truly that is a lesson that continues to require education. I don't think many people are aware of how debilitating and chronic a condition this is.
Yeah, unless you have someone who personally like know who has type 1 diabetes, like I feel like, I mean, type 2 maybe people don't realize because it doesn't happen until later in life usually, or like it's, I don't know, I think it's easier to compartmentalize. Like people can find all sorts of reasons to compartmentalize type 2, but type 1, like you were just born with this disability and you now have to deal with it, but nobody's going to help you. Like nobody's going to help you government wise, assistance wise. Like it's good luck.
Right. And I think almost everyone can say they know someone who has type 1 diabetes, and potentially someone who has died due to complications from it. And I think you're right about type 2 diabetes. It is a lot easier to compartmentalize that because there's a certain stigma, I think, that goes along with type 2 diabetes.
Right. You gave it to yourself.
Right. You did that. That's your fault.
Right.
But yeah, type 1 diabetes, you're just born with a pancreas that doesn't work right. And there is no cure, like you said. The treatments are wildly expensive, very invasive, and ultimately just kind of destroy your body so that you end up needing a kidney transplant. And kidney transplants happen all the time, but they haven't gotten significantly safer either.
Neither has dialysis, although we can do that at home now. My father-in-law, before he passed, was prescribed an in-home dialysis treatment center, which was basically a recliner with all of this equipment attached to it. And the only reason that got through is because my mother-in-law had fairly significant training to be able to do that. So we can do it at home now, but it still looks like you're sticking nails up your arms, right?
She's been driving nails up her arms. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, all right, let's start at the top. This movie starts out with Shelby's wedding.
Right. Yeah. Where her colors are blush and bashful. When
Pink and pink.
One shade is much deeper than the other.
No, it's not.
It's pink and pink.
It's pink and pink.
Church does look like it's been hosed down with Pepto-Bismol.
Exactly.
Oh, and the bridesmaid dresses really are so beautiful. Oh my god. Like
magic. Like, can you the amount of lace and poofy sleeves and those fucking hats, y'all. I was watching that again this morning going, even in the 80s, who thought this was beautiful?
Excessive.
And there were so many bridesmaids. So many of them.
9!
I don't even know that many people.
You know, I've been like, I have seen, I've not been to these weddings because I don't know these kinds of people that have like 10 bridesmaids and 10 groomsmen. But like, I've seen these pictures of like people I'm sort of vaguely aware of, and I just cannot. I'm like, how do you have that many friends already? Like, it took me 35 years to get like five.
I think I've got 4 friends, but I've been in a wedding where I was one of 9 bridesmaids.
Oh goodness.
And it was a lot.
Right,
and I mean, it was beautiful. It was gorgeous.
Yeah.
But it was a lot. And I routinely was like, how, honestly though, you're 25. How do you know this many human beings?
Like sorority sisters in college. That's what I'm going to go with.
It's got to be.
Or cousins. Those are your options. Those are your options.
I don't even have that many cousins.
Well, it's a very Southern thing, right? Like, there are so many. The wedding in particular was as Southern as it could be.
Yes.
The outdoor tent.
Yes.
We'll get to the cake.
Right. The magnolia blossoms floating in the in-ground pool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The argument over whose tree that was, like, that too remains 100% universal.
And trying to get all the birds out of the tree.
And obviously the shooting is doing so much good that he's going to keep doing it.
Right.
Okay, so one of the recipes that we have, I believe, improved for you. I don't know. We'll see. Melissa says we'll see. But that horrific Cuppa salad that they're talking about in the beauty parlor. So the original recipe is cup flour, cup sugar, a cup fruit cocktail with the juices, and then you bake it till it's all brown and bubbly.
Warm and bubbly.
Beth made this yesterday. Tell us about it.
It was, like I said, it was a rousing disappointment. It was incredibly sweet. I'm just so very, very sweet. And I will stipulate that I did use self-rising flour instead of all-purpose flour. I just felt like, it was maybe the salt in the self-rising would cut the sweetness. It didn't. Spoiler alert. There's probably a way to fix this, but not being a chef myself, I made it the way that Truby told me to make it. And I won't make it again like that. I certainly won't. No, thank you.
Like,
it was like you take a bite and you can feel your teeth rotting. Like cavities, you can feel them forming as you're chewing it, and just nope, no thank you.
I grew up on this, or various cobblers of this ilk.
Yeah.
And truly, you do have to cut the sweetness with vanilla ice cream.
Yeah.
Which seems counterintuitive. I know. But you got to cut the sweetness. Okay, Melissa, tell us how to fix this.
Okay, so I did try like a couple of options, and it kind of ended up just like a cobbler, which is like, so I cut the sugar to a half of a cup of sugar.
That's still too much
And
sugar, but yes.
it's still a lot of sugar. However, I then had, let's see, I had a can, which is like a cup and a half of peaches, because I got fruit cocktail, and then I have 3 small children, and somehow that disappeared. I didn't even know they liked fruit cocktail. I did not know this. Like, and then it's just gone. I'm like, okay, well, I have peaches still. So we made it with peaches. I'm sure that it works exactly the same with fruit cocktail, honestly. But so a cup and a half of sliced peaches and a banana mashed up is what I added to like kind of buffer that sweetness of it just kind of like mellows it some. And yeah, that, and then a cup of flour, and mix it all together, bake at 350 till bubbly, which was about 25 minutes. It's still very sweet. It's just not a thing that you're going to want to eat on its own. Like, I think there's just no getting around that. Like, I don't know. I mean, I think there's a reason that maybe the type 1 diabetes is in that area.
So much sugar. And
It's
truly,
so much.
I don't know about y'all, but I did grow up on like so many baked goods that were so sweet that butter, sugar were in everything.
Right.
Everything. There was sugar in the barbecue sauce. There was sugar in the ketchup. There was
The sweet tea is just like, just keep pouring. Just keep pouring the sugar. Just keep pouring. Like,
and my grandma always made sweet tea with like a gallon of sweet tea with 2 cups of sugar.
Yep. That sounds
That's
right.
a lot of sugar.
Yep.
And as a kid, I was like, this is delicious. And as an adult, I'm like, this is a problem.
And I can't drink it any other way is the thing. I was raised on this like liquid sugar, and now nothing tastes right if it's not loaded with sugar.
Well,
but the thing is that it has to be strong enough too. Like, you have to brew the tea strong enough to hold up to that sugar.
Right,
that's what I think. That's what I think people get wrong when they're like, "Oh, this tea is just too sweet." I'm like, that's because the tea is not strong enough. Like,
so many people make it, and it's like sugar water with the faint tea flavor. And no, like, you use enough tea bags and you let it sit and soak and steep to get all that tea out, and then you add the world's biggest amount of sugar you can think of.
Yeah.
And a little water.
A little bit of water. And then like a lemon slice to add the sweetness.
Yeah, or some mint leaves,
We'd leave sun tea out for at least 24 hours, right? Like, you'd take it out and it'd be in that hot, glaring sun. You wouldn't bring it in until you could barely see through the jar.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the appropriate level of brewed for the tea. And that was 5, 6 tea bags. Lipton says 3, maybe 4. No,
that's not sufficient.
Nearly enough tea.
Lipton is very wrong.
And then you drink it and you feel like you've got ants running through your veins, because the amount of caffeine and the amount of sugar, truly, it's really no wonder that the life expectancy is so much lower in the South. Butter, sugar, caffeine, it's all there.
Yeah, there's a big problem with like gallstones and kidney stones in the South. Like, there really is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's got to have something to do with the butter, sugar, and sweet tea.
Something.
Unquestionably. Okay. So one of the things that I was really interested to learn was that red velvet was not considered Southern until this movie.
It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the thing that made red velvet cake into a quintessential Southern dessert. So it was just kind of a thing before that. Like it was one of those, like, you know how in the 50s a lot of companies would put out recipes to get you to buy their stuff. And 40s, 30, like capitalism has a long history of making up recipes to get you to buy their specific product. And so I believe it was, I have notes on this somewhere, but I don't have them in front of me, obviously. The 1940, there was a company in Texas that made red food coloring. They also made like extracts, like vanilla extract, whatever. And they wanted to sell more of their food coloring. So during World War II, because of the food rationing, cut a lot, like there's like all sorts of like depression cakes and other things that cut out the sugar, cut out the butter, cut out the, like every single like you're like, what are we even making this cake out of at this point? Like
chess pie,
plaster dust.
Yeah.
Right. And
yes.
people if you're not from the South, this is not a thing you've likely ever eaten, and it's like flour and water and an egg and a little bit of sugar, and
yep,
we called that a pie and we ate it. And
yep, or mock apple pie. Mock apple pie is still a thing that
beans.
Yes. And you're like, this is not going to taste like apple pie. And you know what? It kind of does. Like, it's bizarre, but it does. But yeah, like, so in the 40s, like World War II, food rationing, sugar rationing. So before that, the red velvet cake doesn't really have like a particular, like we can't pin down when exactly it was invented, but it's basically like just another take on the velvet cake in general, which was introduced as an alternative to, say, pound cakes. So it was introduced to be lighter and airier than a pound cake. And there were all different kinds of velvet cakes, and the red velvet cake was literally just because the natural red velvet cake before the invention of red dye 40 was because it was like a burnt red. It was like a burnt chocolate red, because when the chemical reaction that happens with, like, you can tell that I'm a food nerd. The chemical reaction that happens between natural processed cocoa powder and an acid of some kind. So you can use buttermilk, you can use, let's see, baking soda to make that reaction happen. And you get kind of like a burnt red color. And so that was called red velvet. And then we had the red food dye invented, and they were like, hey, what if we made this even more red? And yeah, that's how we ended up getting like this bright red velvet.
Does red velvet today still include the cocoa?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It does. It's just that, yes, you don't have to use the like the old-fashioned, like the natural processed cocoa powder. Like you can use Dutch processed cocoa powder, which Dutch and natural, if a recipe specifies, use whatever it specifies, because there is likely a chemical reason, like the chemical reaction going to happen. You want to pay attention to that. It's like if something specifies baking powder and baking soda, like use the one that it says, because they are different things. Y'all, I used to work in a bakery where this dude would not listen to me tell him that baking powder and baking soda are two different things. They are not the same thing. You cannot interchange them.
Not at all.
When I was a kid and I was like learning how to bake, my mom told me they were the same thing. And it wasn't until I was an adult, I was like, I mean, they can't possibly be the same thing because they are marketed completely differently. They like some recipes call for both things.
Yep.
Why would I need both things if they're the same thing? Like logistically, this doesn't work. She lied.
She did lie because baking soda will not leaven. Baking powder is what gives cookies that rise. Brownies that rise.
Baking soda has to be combined with something else.
So, okay. We'll include the recipe in the show notes. But walk us really quickly through the changes that you made to make red velvet not red 40.
So, because like a friend of mine has a particular allergy to red food dye. And a lot of people like with ADHD and just a lot of people have, allergies or sensitivities to red 40 food dye. And so I'm actually going back to, so people used to use, the natural chemical reaction to get the red velvet, but they also, when there was food rationing, they were using beets as well to get a brighter, like a slightly brighter red for their red velvet. So I'm actually just basically going back to the original kind of recipes. And I used a full 15-ounce can of beets, which I will specify that I hate beets. I hate them. I cannot stand them. But these cupcakes are good. Like, you can't tell. So I used like a full can of beets, mixed that in a blender with all of my wet ingredients, my oil, vanilla, lemon juice, vinegar. I tweaked some recipes that I found online for red velvet cake and blended that all up until it was like this really lovely pink, like liquid puce color.
Sounds delightful.
Yum.
It's gorgeous. It actually wasn't terrible, but so blended that all up and then in a separate bowl combined all of my dry ingredients, including, I actually like to use the Dutch processed cocoa powder in something that's predominantly chocolate flavored, which it is, because I feel like the flavor is more chocolatey than a natural processed cocoa powder. I feel like you get a better chocolate flavor.
Yeah, I think it's deeper.
It is. It tastes more like biting into a chocolate than, the natural process, which is good, but like needs some more love, like to bring that flavor out. So yeah, I folded those two together, the liquid into the dry, fold those together, and then portioned it out into cupcakes and about 3/4 of an inch or 3/4 full, and baked it at 350 for about 25 minutes. Those come out and they're never going to be like the actual like blood 1980s horror film blood red. They're never going to be that red.
It's horrific. I agree with blood red armadillo. God,
yeah,
so
like an
terrible.
autopsy.
It really did. It really did.
So it's never going to be that red, but it's going to be more delicious and less likely to like give you candy. So yeah, I made it into cupcakes because I don't have time in my life right this minute to make an armadillo shaped cake.
How
But
dare!
if you do, you are welcome to use the same exact recipe. I would probably double or triple it if you're going to do that. Because that's cake. You're going to need more cake. But yeah.
Well, now,
Yeah.
did you make gray icing? And can you tell us how?
I mean, you can make gray icing. The secret to gray icing is like use black food coloring, but don't put nearly enough in it. Like, that's it. I have made gray icing before when I've made like venom cakes for one of my kids' birthday. And
This just seems really unappetizing.
it is. It is. And whenever every single person, including the then 6-year-old that I made it for, bit into it, they were like, I can taste the color and I don't like it. I'm like, that
gray.
It does. Yeah. It tastes gray.
So, like all Southern desserts, red velvet cake is traditionally served with cream cheese frosting, which is sweet and rich. So what have you made for us to go?
So I just go with a pretty like traditional cream cheese frosting. I use a pack, so like an 8-ounce pack of cream cheese and a ounces of butter, softened like to room temperature. And we mix that with a pound of powdered sugar. And then add some vanilla to it if you have it. And if not, I don't know. I don't know what you're doing in your life if you don't have vanilla in your baking cabinet.
Who are you?
Ran out.
You do not have at least some vanillin will do.
And you always, I don't know if you're like me, but you always measure the vanilla from the heart. Right?
It's from the heart. It's like garlic in cooking. Yeah.
Exactly.
Like garlic.
Just, as much as my heart tells me I need.
You do want to watch out, like in some recipes, like you can have too much vanilla because the vanilla extract is basically just vodka, like that's been flavored. So you will get a whiff of that vodka if you like put a ton in there.
So let's see. I was really interested to hear, and I'm sure this is budgetary, but they filmed all of this movie in that small town, which is called, nope, I can't.
Spell it?
Natchitoches? It's in Louisiana.
Which is, Natchitoches?
That might be. I feel like this is probably originally a native tribal name of some kind, but we don't pronounce it that way now. No, the Southern Creole version of whatever the word was before is now entirely, and I say that as someone who lives in Nebraska, right next to Papillion, which is indeed French for butterfly, but we don't say papillon. No, we say papillion. So, like, the Southern butchery of everything name-wise is a well-known.
Yeah.
Right.
They also filmed all of the beauty scenes in an actual beauty parlor. And this one I didn't know. Dolly Parton wrote and performed the theme song that plays during the opening credits, which makes sense. I mean, if you have Dolly,
totally makes sense.
Right. Yeah. You have Dolly, you may as well get her to write something.
Yeah.
Right.
If you use her, if she's already there, use her.
Dolly, Sally Field, Daryl Hannah, and Shirley MacLaine were also all in the original stage production. So basically, they took the stage cast,
and just
ported them over to
transported it.
Hollywood and said, "Here, let's make a movie out of this," and they did.
Yep.
I know that
I will say, the movie
Julia
that I would
Roberts
be
wasn't their first choice to play Shelby.
no, I didn't.
Initially, Meg Ryan was who they picked to play Shelby, and she backed out because the recording schedule interfered with the recording of When Harry Met Sally.
I feel like that was a good choice on her
right
part.
choice.
Yeah.
Right.
She made the right choice.
Like, she would have been fine if she had done both, but like, if you have to choose, yeah.
Right.
Always choose Nora Ephron.
Right. Billy Crystal. That's just amazing. I do want to know what Steel Magnolias 2 would have been about. Right? In true Southern tradition, can you imagine what happened to this family after Shelby died? Like,
so the movie ends like, and it's been months since Shelby died, and Annelle goes into labor, right? The final scene. And so I guess one would have to assume that we would go back, centering on our little beauty parlor crew and Annelle as a first-time mother, and what is it that's her boyfriend, husband, what's it? I can't remember his name. Sammy. When she said, Sammy doesn't know whether to scratch his watch or wind his butt because of her religious beliefs and everything, and like kind of diving into the two of them maybe. But
I'd be curious to know if Jackson had remarried and Jack Jr. had a new stepmom to call mommy, because that too, very Southern.
That is a very Southern widower thing.
I don't know why, but like, for whatever reason, my brain is just going to Raising Arizona as a follow-up of like, like,
I definitely want to get that one on the list.
Yeah.
We definitely, so we've got a couple that we've mentioned today that I'll be culling through show notes after we're done here and going, yep, we're going to talk about this one and we're going to talk about this one. Okay. So what else, y'all? Final thoughts here before we move on to the game.
Who's your favorite character and why?
It's definitely going to be okay, because my brain isn't working. Who my favorite character is.
Your favorite character is Weezer.
Yes. My favorite character is Weezer.
Right choice to me. That is also my favorite character.
I mean, it's what I think that should be everyone's favorite character, because she is chef's kiss, right? She's perfect.
She's like goals. She's every old lady goals.
That's correct. Does not give two fucks about anyone at any time. Does her own thing. Has her own money.
Just kind of angry at the world, rightfully so. Like,
I love the tomatoes, because Southern women wear funny hats and grow things.
Grow things in the dirt.
Yep.
That's just what we do.
And I love the conversation with Clary says Anne Boleyn had 6 fingers, and she's, what happened to the other 4? Like,
no, honey. She's just like the lone voice of reason in that entire town. Like Sally Field's character would be if she weren't such a punk. Like if she felt like speaking up more often, like as opposed to just like holding it all inside and then explode as any of this. Just like maybe, I don't know, be more communicative with your feelings.
It was 1989 in the South. We did not do that.
I know.
Not at all.
We don't talk about what goes on outside of the house, inside of that. Like, we don't talk about inside, outside.
Right.
We definitely do make kidney jokes while playing cards the night before a kidney transplant. That is
a tale of two kidneys.
100% in line with what would happen, but we don't talk about it with anyone. Are you kidding me? Absolutely
not like how we actually feel.
No, God, no.
Well, and it always still all these years later of watching this movie, it is amazing to me that Truvy, Clary, Weezer, Annelle, none of these people knew that Malin was donating a kidney to Shelby until the day before it happened.
The day before.
Yep.
None of them knew.
Really, I'm surprised that they didn't know because it is a small town. Like, everybody knows everything.
But,
like,
Shelby and Jackson didn't live there. After they got married, they moved. So, and I mean, maybe that's why, but it's boggles the mind that they had no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ways in which I think there's a lot to pay attention here about community and the ways in which we do not ask for help until it's almost too late, right?
Yep.
And I have a podcast about that, y'all. On learning how to ask for help. I meet with Marisa Lowen once a month. We talk about asking for help because truly, of all of the things that I have had to relearn as an adult, this has been significant for me. I, probably like the two of you, was raised with that mentality that we do not ask for help outside of our families. That's a sign of weakness. It's something that we don't want to be seen as needing, as not being able to manage our own business.
Yep.
One of the, most important mottos of my family life when I was younger was that it doesn't matter how you're feeling. It matters how you look. It doesn't matter if you're sad, depressed, angry, sick. That doesn't matter. It matters what you look like. So, having your wisdom teeth surgically removed, and then the next day you have to go to a wedding and you have to be fine. You have to look fine. You have to behave as if you're fine.
And it's really... Truly, I thought this was so well written in the ways that that's woven through and very casual. I don't trust a woman who does her own hair.
Right. And she spent $300 on that dress and she didn't even bother to wear a girdle with it.
Right.
And
I haven't left the house without lacquer on these thighs since I was 12 years old.
I was 15.
I was 15 years old.
Truly, the beauty standard is very much tied into this, and the ways in which beauty and appearance demonstrate competency.
Right.
And truly, I feel that's still mostly true in the South.
Yeah. I mean, there were I was not personally in sororities because I was antisocial. Am still antisocial entirely. But I mean, that was definitely part of the culture is I absolutely did not want to be performatively pretty. But it was a requirement to be performatively pretty if I wanted, like, I don't think there was anything wrong with those girls, those women. It's just that, like, as a like as a late teen, early 20 person, like I blamed at that point, like I blamed them, but like it's totally not them. It was totally just culture in general of like, okay, well, you have to wear short skirts to the football game where you're going to freeze your ass off. Like, how does that make sense?
Right.
I am not even on TikTok, and I'm very familiar with the essence of Bama Rush Talk, right?
Ugh.
Like, it's a whole absolute thing when and these are girls, like they're 18, but they're still girls.
They're children.
Their entire identity is wrapped in having the right clothes, having the right jewelry, and being able to fit in societally to that mold. Because if they do not, it will impact the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
That's some fucking pressure for an 18-year-old.
It is. And, you know, I was in a sorority in college, and our sorority, though, was not Greek. So there was no like rushing process where they had to choose you. If you wanted to be in, you just had to complete it was a service sorority. So you had to complete the service hours and you got in. But, you know, it was a little different than the other ones. And I remember thinking, man, at least I'm glad I'm not in these other ones where I do have to dress up for a football game, or I've got to dress up just to go to the weekly meeting. You know, you have to look nice to go to a weekly meeting.
Yep.
And it was crazy, the things that they had to do during rushing and pledging and all that. It was nonsense. We just had to go to a meeting every week and do Habitat for Humanity.
And man, just showing up every week is like killing my neurodivergent soul a little bit. Well, how do I know I'm going to be able to make it every week? Fuck.
Like, I have a commitment of like the same place, the same time every week. That's a lot.
It's making me itchy.
Yeah. So, like, I don't know. Again, like this. Okay, so it feels like the culture. I like put this together into like just now, but like the culture of the South and growing up where appearances are very important, and like the culture is almost kind of 50 years behind sometimes. Also feels like very familiar to military like spouse life. Beth knows what I'm talking about, because if you go to the commissary so the commissary is the grocery store on Post, for anyone who doesn't know. If you go to the commissary on Post, and it's not at every place, like every fort, every base, whatever, but at a decent portion of them, if you go there and you look like hot trash, you don't have your hair done or are wearing a decently acceptable outfit, people are going to notice, and they're going to tell your spouse supervisors. They're going to let people know. And personally, I never cared, but if you do care, they're going to let you know.
And at the first duty station after we got married, I went to the commissary one day, and then later when my husband got home from work, he said, I heard you went to the commissary today. And I was like, yes, I did. How do you know these things? And he's like, you were also wearing sweatpants. And I was like, yeah. And I mean, he didn't care. He thought it was hilarious, right? That someone had seen me and told their spouse who worked with him, who mentioned it. And I was like, they really have nothing better to do with their lives. Yeah, I was wearing sweatpants. It's my only day off this week. I've decided not to wear real clothes.
The hierarchy in not just the military, but the military spouses is 100% a real thing. And it is very similar to the unspoken rules of Southern culture, which, let me just be clear here, as an autistic woman, I didn't fucking get them. I still don't fucking get them now. I cannot emphasize how many things that I fucked up as a kid because there was some unspoken rule that I was supposed to understand and did not.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I conversely was very good at following all of the rules when I was younger. I followed all of the rules. I fit in the way that I was supposed to. And then I moved out and went to college. And I was like, oh, this is who I am. Okay. I mean, I'm a whole new girl. I'm nothing like that girl. That girl hates everything about that world.
Yeah.
And it was, moving out, going to college, and, moving around the country with, following my husband around in the military taught me a lot about who I am and who I am not.
Yes.
And when you are in that Southern culture, when you're born into it, you stay into it, you never go anywhere, you don't marry outside of it. It's a narrow world.
Yeah, I mean, the Midwest is not the South, but still very hidebound in very similar ways.
Yeah.
And I know people who have been on the family farm their entire lives and will never leave. They will not travel. They will not see the world. They will not experience anything outside of their little bubble. And they're content with it, which is fine. I mean, I don't have any problem with people who want to live that way. It just seems so small to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always think if as long as they're happy with the choices that they've made, then I am incredibly happy for them. But, man, you've missed out on some things, like
and it's also that it's also that, like, I would be happy for them if their if their inability to feel like they could do anything didn't infringe upon my rights and my ability to do whatever the fuck I want to do with my life,
That's correct.
Because that's the thing is so I had a roommate in the 1 year I went to the University of Southern Mississippi. I had a roommate who at the time she was coming from a extremely rigid and conservative background. But she was it's like she wanted to be, I don't know, I'm not going to make guesses as to her character, but she told me once, she's like, I think I said something about expanding your horizons, because she was just so adamantly against knowing things and going places. And I said something about expanding your horizons, and she was like, what does that mean? What does it mean to expand your horizons? That's so, it doesn't make any sense. Why do you have to go places? Why do you have to do things to know more stuff? Can't I just read books to understand? I'm like, at that time I did not have an adequate answer, because also it was a semi-volatile situation in my house, and I kind of just didn't want to engage. But it's that attitude of I don't know how to explain to you that you can't do everything from your tiny little bubble. You have to go and experience that other human beings have different living situations, different histories, different cultures than you. that you are not the end all be all of humanity. Like, I grew up with my dad saying, well, you know, some other countries that like the blah blah happens and America's still the greatest place on earth. And I'm like, I mean, but is it? Is it?
Right.
I don't think it
Objectively,
is.
is it? You're right. Factually, is it? Well,
Mhm.
we could debate some points here, and truly, I
Yeah.
love my country, and I also
Yeah.
think that we have
That
some
there's
room
some improvement.
to improve.
Well, it's
Exactly.
like the first scene in the show Newsroom. Have you guys?
Mhm.
And he's he's
It's
on
been a
this
minute.
panel. He's on this panel, and with these college kids are asking questions, and one kid asks him like, "Do you think America is the greatest country in the world, and why?" And the other two panelists are like, "Absolutely, because freedom." and, and then he goes off on this tirade, and he doesn't say anything that isn't true. And that's that's the argument. It's not the greatest country. It could be
It's a
better.
pretty okay country, but yeah, there are a lot of things that could be better.
And relatively speaking, it's a young country.
Yeah.
So, there's room for growth. There's room for change.
And
And
I
I think
think movies like this like highlight just those particular like microcosms of society that are still like, there's a reason this is a cult classic, because it so specifically and perfectly highlights that part of Southern culture, like
Right.
that part of small town. Like you were saying, Briar, like even though this is a Southern movie, like I think it is a small town movie too. Like it is a town that is all up in everybody's business, and the people who live here have only ever lived here, and it's just everybody knows way too much about each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like the scene when they're trying to, learn more about Annelle, Truvia and Clary are asking her, and she says, "Well, I can't really talk about it." And they say simultaneously, "Of course you can.
Of course you can.
Of course you can." And because that's what small town Southern women do, right? They gossip. They know everything.
About each other,
Right.
About each
not
other.
about the world.
No.
And on that note, let's play a game. All right,
Yes.
Melissa?
Okay, so I might play Fuck, Marry, Kill with the characters from Steel Magnolias. So we're gonna give you like a semi-easy one to begin with. Truvy or Weezer or it's not braining. Julia Roberts' character, Shelby.
I think I would marry Weezer.
You would marry Weezer. Interesting.
Yeah.
I think I would marry Truvy. She seems like a good housekeeper, which sadly is not one of my strengths.
See, I would marry Weezer because I feel like I wouldn't get bored. It'd be entertaining. I'd have someone to talk to.
Are you sure you wouldn't just have a heart attack though? Like, I feel like she might just yell so much that you ended up having a heart attack.
Sure. I don't enjoy yelling, but I think I could deal with it as long as, yeah, I think we'd be fine. Now, definitely I would fuck Truvy.
I think I would fuck Shelby.
Yeah.
Julia was very cute in the 80s.
She was adorable. She was super adorable.
She was very cute. I actually think I would kill Shelby.
Well, she died anyway, so
Exactly. We're not missing
Not
anything.
a hard choice.
Just, I mean, real talk, Shelby is my least
Kind of
favorite
annoying.
character. She's the one who's in the movie the least.
Yeah.
And while, you know, that the main tragedy does center around what happens to her, it's really more about how it affects the friend group, like her mother and the friends. And Shelby, you know, I guess we needed her because we needed her to die to have a tragedy.
right.
But it's not about
She's
her.
the movement, right? But it's not
It's not
bad.
about her.
Would we say that she got refrigerated? Like, was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, she just existed to give reasons for other people to do things and feel things.
Right. It's because she doesn't really have much of a character all on her own. You know,
Annoying is her character all on her own.
Yeah. Well, and you know, if you take out the other characters, you know, and you're left with just the story of Shelby and Jackson, what are you left with?
Yeah.
I
mean, Dylan was pretty cute in the 80s too.
Oh, sure, but he wasn't one of my choices.
No.
Now we're choosing between Jackson and the dad, whose name I can't remember if we ever actually
Drum.
Yeah, Drum.
I'm scared. So perfect. Absolutely impeccable.
He's a perfect drum eater.
About that upright Southern asshole was just nailed. Okay.
Like, I know so many of those men. Like, so many. Or let's see, Jackson, Drum, or oh god, okay, remind me, Mrs. The radio owner, the
Clary.
Yeah, Clary.
Drum, Jackson, or Clary.
So I'm definitely killing Jackson because even after 30 years, that motherfucker makes me mad.
Yeah, that's fair.
Truly.
Or you could just hate fuck him.
I realize that not everything is his decision here, but the lack of care for his wife's health is so typical of that breed of Southern gentleman.
He's quite terrible. When, you know, in the beginning, before the wedding, Shelby says that he says, we don't need to have kids. You know, we don't have to have any kids. We'll adopt them. I'll buy them. I'll buy you as many kids as you want. And then less than a year later, they've exhausted all their options.
Exhausted all of their options. An attorney has I don't buy it.
Right. I don't buy that. He's a Southern lawyer. He could buy a kid anywhere he wants to.
Yeah.
Especially in a place where, sidestepping a little, they were taking poor children from their homes and selling them to rich white people.
Right. That still happened in 1989.
Right.
Let's not
it still happens.
It
happens now.
Right.
And I mean, that was also like the height of immigrating, like adoptees from like Vietnam and like China. That
China
it like
was more in the 90s, but yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, there's always a very poor country or a country who, for their own reasons, like, can't have kids there or wants to get their kids somewhere else, like, as a country. And if we're talking just logistics, Jackson, like, if you wanted it that bad, you could have figured it out.
Right.
I mean, there was an entire hospital full of Ukrainian surrogate mothers that was bombed during the war, and they're still managing to push out other people's babies.
Yep.
I'm not condoning this. Let me
No,
state for the
none of
record.
this. None of this we are condoning. We're just pointing out facts.
Right.
The absolute lack of care for his wife's health. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think I'd have to kill Jackson as well. But I think deciding between Clary and Drum for who to marry and who to fuck, that's a little more difficult.
That's a little harder.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to marry Drum.
I don't think I could be married to Drum.
I don't think I could be married to Drum. I think that would be a terrible, terrible life. That would be, again, such an upright Southern gentleman who probably has never made a meal in his fucking life.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely doesn't get his socks in the hamper. Like, the bar is
there
on
would be
the
a
floor.
reason to need a very Southern lawyer, like, very soon in that relationship.
That's correct.
We should keep Jackson alive for that, if for no other reason. We're going to need a lawyer. Yeah, so I think I'd have to marry Clary. But Drum might be fun in the sack once.
Also, Clary is loaded. She's loaded.
Right.
She's got more money than God.
Yeah. She bought a radio station so she could walk around in a locker room and look at the naked football players. I mean,
and talk about whether their jerseys are purple or aubergine.
Yep.
All right, y'all. This has been absolutely stellar. I cannot wait to do this again. So, should we just move on to the next Southern classic and get fried green tomatoes out of the way?
Absolutely.
Yeah, as long as we can find that somewhere on streaming. I need to make sure first.
We'll make sure that it happens.
Yeah, because Steel Magnolias is on it. So if you want to go watch it and have a watch party with a couple of the foods that we talked about, maybe add a cherry Coke or some Low Country boil. I'm not going to tell you how to make that because your grandma probably has a recipe.
The same recipe for Low Country boil as any.
And I'm not fighting grandmas today.
Absolutely not. No fighting grandmas today.
No.
You just need to make sure you have Old Bay. That's all that's required.
Yeah.
So much Old Bay.
So much Old Bay.
Dump it. Dump the whole thing.
Okay, y'all. As Melissa said, this one is available on Netflix. We will have the recipes in the show notes. We will have a bunch of links to places and additional information for you to piece through. And we will be back in 2 weeks, hopefully, with fried green tomatoes. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you all so much for being here. If you would like to subscribe, you can do that at neurodiversitymedianetwork.com, and we will see you there. All right. Have an amazing day.
Thank you.